Howdy folks, Moose here. Got a vid for you. Not going to be really a short one. It's all about the Profoto A10 flash and how I'm using it as a telephoto flash for my critter work. So it's going to be kind of in two parts. First one is about the Profoto, get that over with, and then I'm going to go into how I'm applying it to make the photographs. Now, why have I moved to the definitely more expensive Profoto A10 lighting system? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the big one is that really big round light. That big round light, okay, is just a gorgeous light. Point blank, that's what it's all about, is light. And that round tube, it's just a spectacular light source. And with that, it's really simple, so I think it's very simple, to meld the flash with the ambient light for what I needed to do in my wildlife work, which is to bring out color. Now, how does this all work? First, understand that the A10, okay, is the latest evolution of this flash unit. And this A10, what makes it unique is the fact that it talks Bluetooth. Bluetooth to my smartphone, my iPhone. Why is that important? The biggest thing is the fact that Profoto is really proactive in doing firmware updates. And you do that via the iPhone. They talk to each other, says firmware update, and you do it. So this last one I just did maximize the energy used. So it actually is going to do better performance than I am going to quote to you. That's very cool. Next thing about the Profoto A10 is, to me, a biggie, is this head, okay, doesn't have click stops. It will go anywhere I want it and stay there. If it's like between a click stop, gravity's not going to make it go somewhere else. And as I'm out walking, that's a big deal. Next, it has a zoom head that you can either A, change via the iPhone Bluetooth, B, through the menu system, or C, which I love, is simply rotating this ring. I can rotate that, change the zoom, and as you're going to find out, that's really important based on how close I am to the subject I'm photographing. Now, it's about a 1.2 pound unit. What I really love is it does not use, underline, emphasize, bold, italicize, does not use AA batteries. Instead, it has this single battery that clips right in there, and it charges in about an hour. They say an hour 10 minutes. I just do an hour 20, hour 25 minutes. Charges. Now, their stats say that that battery, if you're doing full bursts, it's going to give you about 450 bursts. Now, I'm never using it that much, and I got as much as when I was shooting down in Australia, all those birds. I would get between, seriously, around 1,800 to 3,000 bursts on that battery and still had time to go. That's a lot of flash photography to do. Battery problem was just not an issue. The next thing that I think that's really amazing about this is that the power that's coming out of this unit, literal power, it's 70, excuse me, I'm looking at my notes because I'm wondering what I'm looking at. It's what, 76 megawatts? I think it is 76 megawatts. You know, that's a whole lot more than other flashes that I was using with this system. Now that power, you gotta remember, I'm not using it myself as a means of dealing with exposure. I'm trying to clean up color, but that power permits me to zoom back that head. Go, you could say, at a wider angle coverage for even a telephoto zoom. And that wraparound light is gorgeous. And because of all that power, it's able to do it. Now you can trigger this in a number of ways. I have here the air remote, and that's because I have the Profoto B1, B2, B10, and this fits in with that system. So with this, I can change the power ratios for all those units. You don't have to go that far. You can get the little Pro Connect. No, wrong. That's not the name. Let me look at my notes real quick. You can get oh yeah, it's called the Profoto Connect. The Pro Connect's the brand new one that came out. You don't need that, does a ton of light. That's kind of like McNally kind of control. You can get the Profoto Connect. It's a little round guy goes up here, and it's going to do basically the same thing, except for you can't run a whole bunch of flashes. It's just going to sync with the one. Now, these will work TTL or manual. Now, here's the really the beautiful thing about it. You have this dial right here, and you can change the numbers. You'll see it back there change. And it's got a 9-stop power range between all those numbers. Why is that important? Well, let's say you're like myself and you don't want to use TTL. You want to be in control of the flash. With this system, what you do is you simply put it to TTL. You can put it to TTL on the side. You could put it TTL through the control unit. And either way, you can go TTL, you can take a picture of your subject. Whatever it is, whatever distance it is, whatever lens you've got, f-stop, makes no difference. You just take a picture that how you're going to take that picture. So you'd have all those things set, ISO and f-stop and distance, the three main things that are part of a flash exposure. Boom, you take a picture TTL. It's going to give you a number right here. Now, if you want to go to manual, all you do is switch to manual, and there's the exposure for 1:1 ratio manual. It's already set for you. If you're going to use it as a means of fill, if it says right now 3.2, I would take it down to 2.2, take it down 1 stop, perfect fill. In other words, you don't need a flash meter. It's all built in there. It's going to do that real challenging exposure stuff for you like that. It's brilliant. I love that. Now, you can buy different, it has the magnetic. You can put different kind of gels and grids. It comes with a great dome. There's our light reflectors. It does a lot of that stuff. Personally, I don't need it for my wildlife work, but what it's going to do is mesh with the Z9, Z6 II, D6, whatever body you're shooting with. What's really important, it's going to work with the high-speed sync, and it does it automatically. Profoto and Nikon are working in conjunction with each other, so if in the menu system, the camera body, you have high-speed sync selected, which I do in custom settings, the shutter speed goes up to 320, 500, 800, whatever the shutter speed, it's going to do high-speed sync for you automatically. You don't have to think about it. It's just going to do it. And that's really the important part. Now, when it comes to the way that I'm going to work with it, this is the rig you see. That's what I used in Australia. This is the typical rig and the way I'm going to have it. I've got the Z400-45. I have the Z9. I have the air remote and the A10. Now, the bracket, that's a whole other story. This is an old, really right stuff bracket. These brackets are no longer on the market. They don't sell them. You can find them on eBay. You can find them used at a number of camera stores. KH has a number of them. And each bracket, they made 3 of them back in the day, had a different diameter and size to this curve. I have this one you see here, which is the smaller one, the smallest of the 3, works on the 400. If I'm going to shoot with the 800 or the 180-400, and I do with this system, I have a bigger bracket. The key thing is the bracket attaches to the actual ARCA groove here on the foot. So wherever I point this camera, whether it's horizontal or vertical, okay, the flash is staying above the lens axis. That's really important. Okay, so what I've got going here is the basic Profoto A10 air remote telephoto rig on a bracket. Now, how do I go out to do a shoot? Let's talk about that for a second. Before I even go out and actually in the process of taking pictures, there's a couple of things I need to do so when I go out, it's kind of seamless. That's really important. Wildlife photography by itself is complicated enough. If you're having to find the subject and then find the subject in the viewfinder and then figure out the flash and then get it in focus and then take a picture and use proper hand-holding technique, by the time you get that out done, the critter could be dead, right? So we need to have a system, and that's really important, okay? You have a system before you even start. So let's start with the real simple basics, and that is the powering up of the system. Now remember, you've got circuit boards and all this good stuff in here, and it's connected to the hot shoe. The hot shoe is connected to all that stuff. So the very first part of the process is you need to make sure that the hot shoe is dry before you put any flash in there. I mean, it's just simple. Water and electricity don't mix. Make sure that's is dry, okay? Now, so I have a power up and power down routine I've done since day one with these flashes. And I'm talking about day one when I used to use the Norman 200B telephoto system, which was this big head and big telephoto reflector and cords, and went to a battery pack in my belt. I mean, what I love about this is there's no cords. It's as light, 1.2 pounds. It's as light as you can get it. So the power up, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on the A10, okay? I always do the flash first. Next, I'm gonna do the controller. Last thing I'm gonna do is turn on the camera. Then when I do to power down, the opposite. I'm gonna turn off the camera, turn off the remote, turn off the flash. I've done that since the very beginning of using flash. I don't remember who taught me that and kind of instilled it in my mind so we wouldn't fry anything. And I've done it ever since, and I've never had an issue. First part, powering up. Next, you need to understand the inverse square law. You don't have to memorize it like I have. You don't have to have it, tattooed on the inside of, I'm not going to show you. You just have to understand that flash is kind of wimpy and it falls off inversely to the square of the distance traveled. Yeah, you don't want to understand that or memorize it. But what you need to understand is 400 millimeter lens focuses down to about 6 feet. How far am I going to, have my subject when I take this picture? You need to have kind of a range already in your mind. How far, the furthest distance you want them. So in my case, it's going to be about 20 feet. Now, we're going to use this, as I'm going to talk about later, for color, which means I'm working in light, kind of like what I'm shooting this video in right now. It's kind of got a bluish color tint. And you're going to be probably in a forest or something like that. So this is, 20 feet trying to see a subject. Probably, you're probably optimistic thinking 20 feet. So I'm going to take the camera, and I'm going to be at 20 feet physically from a test subject. What's a test subject? It could be the tree trunk, it could be a pine cone, it could be Sharon, it could be anything about 20 feet away. Not really worried about color or tonality. I just want to get a basic idea of my exposure where I'm at. So here's the thing to think about when you're doing all this. The ambient light. That's going to be the lighting for the background, for the stage of your photograph. The flash, that color, that's going to be for the star, your subject. So you're going to use exposure compensation in the camera body to make the background lighter or darker, that stage. And then you can use the flash to bring up the light on the subject. It's important for you to understand that I am not doing this for exposure. I'm doing it for color. So this whole process is for color, okay? So I'm going to get to the proper distance. I'm going to select the ISO I need. And you got to realize if you're working in a forest, you might have to raise the ISO to maybe 800, maybe 1600. It all depends. And as you raise your ISO, it's going to change the effective distance of your flash. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photograph with no flash, okay? And I have the middle button on the Z9 program, so I just depress that button and it disengages the flash. It won't fire. It's very quick and simple. That's how I take all the before and afters, how I determine, especially back in the computer, if I did something right or wrong. Got to have that before picture. So I'm going to take that before picture, click. I'm going to look at the LCD or inside the EVF. I'm going to look at the ambient light exposure. Make a quick judgment call. Do I want it lighter or brighter? Dial in exposure comp on the body because I'm shooting aperture priority, and boom, I'm done. And none of that is going to affect the flash exposure. It's important to understand that in aperture priority, okay, exposure compensation on the body is not going to affect the flash exposure when you're shooting manually. Next, I'm going to take my finger off the button, take that picture, click, okay, and then I'm going to look at the exposure. Now, if you have the luxury of time, all right, you can put it to TTL, take a picture, look at the number, and go down one. So if it says 9.6, you'd hit it at, you go 8.6, and you'd be basically in the ballpark. Now, from my own shooting and shooting with it quite a bit and shooting 1,000 images, I know that right off the bat, at my personal range of 20 feet or less, I'm going to have the range on here. I'm going to have it either at 4.1. 4.1 is going to be, for when it's further out, and when it's closer to me within, 10, 12 feet, I'm going to be at 3.8. That's all the power I'm using out of this flash. That's it. And the zoom head is a big part of this process. So the zoom head, it's not as intuitive as, it doesn't show you millimeters, it just shows you a coverage icon. So all the way out, it's about 105. I click it down to like 85 or 75. I'm broadening out unless the subject is within 7 feet, and then I'm going to go to about 50 millimeter. I'm going to make the zoom quite large. So that's the process. I'm going to power up correctly. I'm going to take that test shot at the distance, have the lens basically always wide open, because that's a big part of flash exposure. Check the ambient light, flash exposure, boom, I'm ready to go. So now, let's go take some photographs. Okay, let's do a quick review. So I have my Z400 4.5 wide open at 4.5. I've got my ISO for discussion's sake at 800. I have done the correct power up routine, flash, controller, camera body, taken my first shot for the ambient light, taking my shot for the flash. They're all set up. It's ready to go shooting. Now, how am I applying this? The vast majority of the time, I am using this rig strictly for birds. Now, you got to understand that birds' feathers are meant to reflect light. That's what they're all about, is that reflecting light. That's why there are so many different shapes and sizes and colors. Now, that color, North America got really, as far as I'm concerned, kind of the short end of the stick when it comes to colorful birds. You go to someplace like Australia, and it's like every bird has got, half the rainbow at the very minimum. Now, you go into a situation like right now, we've got, this preponderance of blue light. Shorebirds on the beach, for example, and it's an overcast day. Or you go into a forest where you've got shadow, perhaps even mixed light if the sun is out, and you've got all that green light filtering down. The colors from those birds is not going to record on this film, this digital camera, the way that your mind is seeing it. We've got to introduce this 5500 Kelvin. The 5500 Kelvin coming from our flash, it just pegs the color. The camera sees it, goes, whoo, and it sees the oranges, the greens, the blues, the purples, okay? So it's all about color. What kind of color? Well, it could be as simple as, the incredible, drawing a blank on the fairy wren here. Anyway, the superb fairy wren. I knew I'd get the name. The superb fairy wren. Look at the blues in this. That blue, shot on an overcast day. The camera is low on the ground. Boom, hit with the A10. Look at that. That blue is electric. Now, that's one example. What if you just want to meld the light? Because here's a gray thrush shrike. Woo! Lots of colors, lots of tongue twister names, these birds in Australia. Now, it's basically a gray bird in this green world. I just want to meld them together because it's meant to blend in. So I'm going to probably use a little bit less light, but that light's still there to bring out what you see in the shrike. What if I want incredible color like this Australian king parrot? Look at these colors of this adult male. Who comes up with these colors anyway? Bright orange and green. I really like to, how is he going to hide in a forest? He's not. That's a whole nother biological thing that got my mind going. Okay, how about this, real simple, very sweet little eastern yellow robin, another great bird. Subtle color, but boy, in the shadows of the forest, it just pops. And then, there's things like dull color, like, this eastern whip bird, craziest sounding bird of the planet. The male makes it sounds like a whip cracking, and the female's there. She's the final pop of that whip. So that's, how they come up with that combo. But, there's this basic kind of bird, right? But I want you to see it. But then I want you to see the action of that crazy call. So then I have a, got a little ghosting going on. That means the shutter speed is not fast enough to stop the ambient light action. I mean, I've got so many examples of how this flash is bringing all this stuff. What if I want to tell a story, for example, of the Regent bowerbird, or I want to show you some more of the satin bowerbird. I mean, the examples go on and on how the flash is bringing out the color. So let me show you some examples, okay? That's really the important part of this whole lesson. Let me show you some examples. Now, just as a reminder, the flash, the vascular time is between 3.8 and 4.1. That is working with the Z400 4.5 at 4.5, ISO 800 or 1600. Average distance was about 11 feet. Sometimes it was closer. So I'm start off, let's do the king parrot. Here it is, sitting on the perch. Again, what I do is I look at the ambient light. In my mind, it's the background or the stage for my star. And I'm going to get that exposure nailed. And that, for me, is pretty simple. It's just that if I wasn't using a flash, it's a normal number. And then I'm going to hit it with flash. And because of the distance, it was probably a little bit further, because it's a big bird. It's probably as big as the Z400 4.5. It's a big bird. The zoom, okay, was probably around 75 or so, just barely notched in there. And boom, I just hit enough light to kiss the colors to make them pop off the film. You can see the before and after. It's just that simple. Now, how about the satin bowerbird? Now, this is a bird that, man, if you look at it with your naked eye, it looks black, but it's anything but black. A little bit of color, and you can see this incredible iridescent blue and purple that's in those feathers. Really stunning. And the eye. Now, in this first shot here, you can see how the flash is bringing out the information in the shadow side of the bird. So yeah, it does have a little influence on exposure, but look at the color, especially all of a sudden you can see that second eye. Now this other photograph, what's really important to me is you can see the shape of the head, but more importantly, the muscles around the neck and the shoulder. And why is that important? This bird actually shoves sticks in the ground and makes a bower. And then it gets in there with all its little trinkets it's brought around. It's a whole nother story. And it does a dance and gets the female. And if he's lucky, you know the ending. But he has to shove these sticks in the dirt. He's got this big muscle. I wanted you to see that. And the flash is bringing out not only the color, but the contour of that muscle. And then how about, well, let's go back to that eastern yellow robin. It's got such a soft, pale yellow. And it really just sucks up all the ambient light. But when I kiss it with a flash, look how it just instantly kind of pops. It's just a beautiful, subtle yellow. And if you think you're going to be able to do this in a heartbeat and just like instantly have this nailed, you're not. So I'm going to encourage you that whatever flash you're going to use, and keep in mind that before I was using and switched to the A10, I was using the SB5000 with the WR11A. I used that to do the same thing. It's just the quality of light is so much better on the A10. That's why I've switched. And to know that, I shot a lot. And before I even went out in the field, I had test subjects that I worked on. The last one that I did to get to learn the A10, Sharon liked a lot. It's a red cardinal, stuffed animal about that big. And I literally just placed it different places, on a lampshade, in a bookshelf, anywhere. And I just kept taking pictures of it. And I would change up my physical distance to it. I would change the distance between it and the background. I would change the light. And I just kept shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. So in my head, I had a roadmap that when I went out and saw the real thing, it was easy to do. So, sum it all up. The Profoto A10 is a spectacular light source. And since we're all about writing with light, I don't know how you can ignore the fact that this is just spectacular light. Next, I'm using it as a telephoto rig as you see it, so it's portable, it goes out in the field. And lastly, I'm using it for color, not for exposure, not for lighting ratios. So, there you have it. The Profoto A10 telephoto flash, the way Moose uses it.